Our Hockey Insiders are brought to you by Pro-Am Sports. This Wednesday is the deadline for that signing with Ethan Morrow. Vincent Desharnais' deadline is April 3rd, and Ryan Smith's deadline is April 6th. Find more on that and everything else they got going on at Pro-Am Sports at proamsports.ca. All right, let's bring in Dregs. Dregs, overall, I feel like I have to feel pretty good about a March 24th flood. I mean, come on.
That's pretty solid. I'm listening to you tell that story, and I'm thinking to myself, Southern Ontario is a different beast than Alberta, Edmonton especially. So I get it. We didn't drift too many days into late March or early April. So that's impressive. And I'm also, you're starting to waver a little bit. I heard you talk about the kids don't use it that much.
I know.
They're busy. They've got hockey. No, hold on. They're still very young. Yeah. And what you will realize, and they will come to appreciate and love, is as their organized hockey gets maybe a little bit more serious, they'll run to the backyard rink after practice, because you know what happens at every level of minor hockey? Structure and drills and doing all of the stuff that these kids don't love to do. So they come back to the backyard rink and they can celly and they can go bar down. They can do all those things. So at least that was my experience, Dusty.
Well, I'm going to have to clip this and send it to my wife and be like, listen, see what Drake said? Like, we still need the rink.
Put in the presentation.
I still want to do the rink. Tam's like, I don't think we need the rink next year. I said, I don't know. So
yes, you do.
That's encouraging.
100%.
I like that. Okay, so then I didn't need to go down to the basement and cry after what I thought might have been my last flood last night. So that's good news. Now I'm a little bit relieved. Okay. All right. Let's move along. Let's refocus. Let's like a bad weekend for the Oilers. They get run out of the building on Saturday night on Hockey Night Canada, and then they blow one against Ottawa, and Ottawa's power play just destroys them yesterday. So let's go back to what happened in Toronto for the Oilers on Saturday night, Dregs.
Well, obviously, they weren't ready to start on time, as cliche as that sounds. The Maple Leafs knew that game had a special tone to it. And as much as it's always about McDavid and Draisaitl, the fact that Zach Hyman, who's still beloved in that building, right, as a former Maple Leaf, comes into town and has the opportunity to score 50 and rub it in, that also added another layer to what should have been a better showdown than what it turned out to be. Now, I will give the Oilers, some style points for at least pushing back later in the hockey game and making it closer than what it looked like. I mean, midway through the hockey game, it looked like this was going to be a flat-out blowout. And it didn't turn out to be that. But I think that's a pretty sound wake-up call for not just the Edmonton Oilers, but for any of the top teams, right? And I'm not talking about Toronto is a really good hockey club, but just the experience of going through Ontario, losing the way that they did to the Maple Leafs, and then going up against an Ottawa Senators team that is still very much an enigma. You don't really know what you got when you're playing against the Sens, because they've had their share of duds, but of late they've elevated their level of compete, and I think we saw that one against the Oilers. And when I look at Ottawa, I also see a club where individual players are trying to prove not only that they're established in the National Hockey League or they're playing for a job, but they want to be measured against the better teams in the NHL and the best players in the NHL. So that might have been part of what went down with the Sens and the win over the Oilers yesterday.
Enigma is a good word, Darren, and I don't think any of us in this room nor yourself would have the Ottawa power play as something that we would have latched our horses to yesterday. I mean it can happen. And you mentioned the game Saturday against Toronto not showing up on time. I think we've talked about this team not being a full 60 team on numerous occasions this season, whether it's slow starts, whatever. But what would you say after these two games and watching the Oilers again Saturday? Big night, Hockey Night in Canada, Leafs, all that stuff. Yeah. But then yesterday, Ottawa, it's kind of one of the, it's almost an opposite game of the Saturday night affair. 13 games left, penalty kill, defense showing up in time. What is it that the Oilers now will have to drill in prior to postseason? What would you say is the number one thing they need to focus on from now till the postseason to get things right and get things going again?
You just said it, focus, right? That's what they have to drill down on. And I would say the same thing in the Maple Leafs, to be fair. And I'm sure that there have been games of late where Rick Tocchet would say that. And look at what the Winnipeg Jets are going through right now. When you're at this stage of the regular season, this is the time of year where coaches go bonkers. They do, because you would hope that all the time that you've invested in structure and systems and the details that have to be observed are second nature. You don't have to talk about those things anymore. You hope that if you're a top contending team, as a staff, you just kick the door open and you let your horses run, and they just do it because it's systemic and it's habitual. And we're not seeing that. We're not seeing that in Edmonton or certainly Winnipeg. And even the Maple Leafs yesterday against Carolina.
Yeah.
I mean, they play so well against Edmonton, and then they go back to back and they get Carolina. And their goaltending in Joe Wool was very, very good. So to come back to your question, I think that would be the reminder of Chris Knobloch and the coaching staff is, guys, it's not about the obvious starting on time, which we didn't do on Saturday. It's playing our game with everybody going, whether it's special teams or 5-on-5. It shouldn't matter. I mean, to this point of the regular season, you've got to be dialed in, because guess what you're going to find out when you get to the playoffs? The best teams always find a way to lean on their structure and lean on the fact that the detail work is second nature. So I don't think that there's anything to be alarmed by, but these are healthy reminders with 10, 12 games to go in the regular season. You've got to tighten up. You've got to tighten up, especially in the West when you look at the matchups and what round one might look like, or again, as you go deeper. And the plan for the Oilers is pretty clear.
West playoffs are going to be amazing. I cannot wait for those playoffs to get rolling. Yeah, like we said, 13 really games left. I know there have been, some surprise 50-goal campaigns in the history of the National Hockey League. And Hyman didn't get it on Saturday. He got it yesterday with a nice little backdoor tap in on a feed from McDavid. But when you look at Hyman's path just to get to the National Hockey League and then to work his way up in the National Hockey League and then to get to it. And he was great in his postgame yesterday. The one quote was, I scored 10, 15, 20 goals. And people are like, he's a hardworking player who plays with good players. He goes, it's still kind of the narrative today. But he still kind of laughed. This is a phenomenal story. I mean, the season itself is great.
Love it.
But the Zach Hyman story is unbelievable.
Yeah, you know what? We isolated that soundbite for Darren Dreger, which we'll record tomorrow, because it's just a direct message for basically every player that's trying to find their way towards a career in hockey, a professional career. But that's just an honest and blunt assessment by Hyman. And I could appreciate it because I saw it firsthand in Toronto. And, he's not exaggerating that narrative. Hyman absolutely willed his way onto the top line of the Maple Leafs. And since then, even though Max Domi and Tyler Bertuzzi, they're playing now with Austin Matthews on the top line because Marner has been sidelined with an ankle injury. But their play of late has been decent. But all season long, Sheldon Keefe has been auditioning for someone to play with Matthews on that left side. And he's been auditioning for that player since the moment that Zach Hyman put pen to paper and moved from Toronto to Edmonton to play with McDavid and Draisaitl and the Oilers. It's a fantastic story and a terrific career. And every time I hear Hyman speak, and especially in post-game last night, he's disappointed the game didn't end the way that they had hoped. But when you achieve a milestone like that, you just get the real sense of character from Hyman, right? Just the quality of the individual. And now I'm thinking about, okay, he's going to score 50 plus this year. That's abundantly obvious. You do get the sense that any level of success that the Oilers have in the playoffs, he's going to be a huge part of that. My brain then goes way beyond, what does post-career look like for Zach Hyman?
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure what that is. Is it outside hockey? I mean, possibly. I mean, I could see this guy leading any sort of real successful
next social media app creator. He'll have the next social media app.
I don't think there's anything you can limit it to. He's got the gaming company. He's an author. Who's
to say?
I don't know.
Who's to say?
Who's
to say? And then you could envision him as a coach. I mean, the way he plays the game. I mean, I think of the presence of a Rod Brindamore, two different styles. But Hyman has that presence whereby you don't want to, I wouldn't think as a young player, if you're playing with him, you don't want to disappoint him. You want to play to his level every night, because what you know is he's going to drag you into that fight, right? He's going to present a level of compete that is, I mean, it attracts other players into that march. So we'll see moving forward, but terrific story. Sam Reinhart, the Florida Panthers, another great story.
Yeah. Great season.
I mean, just two players at the beginning of the year. If you had your bingo cards out and you had to say, okay, dab your 50 goal scores for 23-24, Zach Hyman isn't on that bingo card. Reinhart would be a long shot, and two terrific stories.
You know, we talk a lot here about the West, and some of the heavy hitters that they've got in the playoffs are going to be amazing. Florida has been so good for quite some time over in the East. I didn't realize that Boston and the Rangers and Carolina are all still right there battling with the Panthers for top spot. The Leafs, seeing them on Saturday night, and getting into some of the preview stuff heading into that game, are they kind of sort of stuck in the middle there? Like there's a bunch of teams that are worse than them, and then there's like kind of these four elite teams at the top of the conference. Is that how the East sorts itself out?
It does. Toronto deserves a little bit more credit. If they can consistently play the way that they did, against the Oilers on Saturday, then they deserve to be in that conversation. I don't know if you guys watched Joel Edmondson on Saturday. That's the best game he's played since arriving in Toronto, and maybe the best game of his year. And he does nothing fancy. It's always two hands on the stick in the defensive zone. He boxes guys out. He's a nasty bit of business, and he's simple. Off the glass and out most times, whatever it takes. But Draisaitl had enough of Edmondson on Saturday.
Yeah.
That's the way they have to play as a group, because you do have that high separation here. You've got your elite level players like Matthews and Nylander. And then because of the salary cap, there's a distinct separation there. But Brad Treliving has done good work. I mean, many have questioned his ads in Bertuzzi and in Domi. I'm trying to think of some of the other pieces. I mean, they brought in Marty Jones, who was terrific when he had to be, when they needed to lean on him in goaltending. So I do think that Toronto gets a little bit short-shifted in looking at the bigger boys. Guys, it's hard not to believe in the Bruins because they continue to find a way to do it. But I look up the middle of the ice of the Boston Bruins, and I'm just not sure how they're going to find a way in a tough playoff series. Rangers, that's different for me. Carolina, different. Those are two very good hockey clubs. But, I think Toronto does deserve to be in that conversation.
Before I let you go, you mentioned a new Ray and Dregs coming tomorrow. What's the plan? What's the plan for Tuesday?
Well, Ray is taking some family time this week, which is good for him and good for the family. So it sounds like we've got the O-Dog.
O-Dog sliding back in.
Yeah, he's sliding back in for Tuesday's episode. So we'll talk. He loves Zach Hyman, and why wouldn't you? So clearly we'll revisit 50 goal plateau there. You'll look around the league, and then Ray will be back on Thursday, and we're still, trying to nail down a guest for Thursday. So, just another week as we grind through the later stages of the regular
let's
season.
get to the playoffs here for sure. Dregs, thank you very much for the encouragement on rink next year. I'm going to pass that along to the family, and I'm going to be back. You're going to see me next October. I'll be like, I'm flooding. It's great. It's
awesome. For sure.
Yeah, all right, man. We'll see you later.
Okay, have a good one.
There you go. That's Darren Dreger. Does a great job. Ray and Dregs is an excellent show. If you haven't checked that out yet, make sure you do on all of your podcasting platforms. And as always, all of our Hockey Insiders brought to you by the great crew over at Pro-Am Sports, where, much like Zach Hyman, like nobody ever says a bad thing about Zach Hyman. Nobody ever says a bad thing about Pro-Am Sports.